Rock music's origins in the 1950s is strongly associated with the teen culture that had yet to exist up until that point. Ever since this new economic avenue was formed, record companies and programs began to formulaically target these teenagers.
You know, growing up in the 60s and 70s, man, you had the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, the Talking Heads, I mean, you know, even the Pretenders.
Growing up a kid in the early 80s, alternative represented not so much a specific style as a vibe. There really weren't very many alternative stations in the 80s. It was kind of a cool thing when there started to be more stations. In the late 80s and in the early 90s, as the music became more popular, it reached a critical mass where it got large enough that commercial radio stations were willing to take a chance on what had, prior to that point, been a very fringe format in terms of commercial radio.
Nirvana came out and all of a sudden everything was different. All of a sudden it was more about slurchy and it was kind of just performance and it was just angst.
And when then other bands like Pearl Jam followed and 9 Inch Nails and Green Day and Soundgarden and Smashing Pumpkins and that sort of glory era of grunge around 1991, 92, 93, it was, for a moment you felt like we win. What happened is you had these bands, you know, in 4 years you go from Nirvana to Third Eye Blind on the radio. And once you get to that point, like, it's completely like lost its meaning.
Without further ado, put your hands together for Jealousy Kirk.
There were like 4 or 5 years when I didn't understand it myself. The current audience really likes it, and I didn't get it.
Y100rocks.com, the alternative is online. Adam B. still with you here at the bunker. The announcement of the station's format flip over to hip-hop kind of took everybody by surprise. Yeah.
Oh, O.A.R? Oh my god, I love O.A.R.
You know, in the late 80s, college radio was the hippest thing in the world. Now, if you're a college radio band, you're not cool anymore. It's like, everything wrong is happening. And just like everything else, it'll implode and build back up.
Well, now the profit margins are so small, the record companies are struggling so much that there is no fudge factor. It's just, what can we put out that's going to sell 8 million copies to 14-year-olds? The common denominator has been dumbed down more so than it ever has been before. Because with the advent of Pro Tools and the home taping system, with a computer now, I mean, before this console and all this equipment would cost you millions of dollars. The good news is anybody can put out a record nowadays. The bad news is anybody can put out a record nowadays. It is very frustrating because it's easy to take a defeatist attitude and say, oh, it's screwed up and it's gone and it's never going to come back. We keep pitching really these crappy bands. Radio airplay is so segmented and so narrow that in Philadelphia, the 4th largest market in the country, there's no modern rock radio stations. The fact that there wasn't a big enough call for it that another programmer decided to pick up the slack.
You know, at the time, I guess it was 2001 when the Strokes and the White Stripes and some of these new bands started to come onto the scene. It was the moment when I said, all right, it can come back. Now, I get this music.
When it happened, when the format flip happened, and when all this stuff started happening with the format and some of the big stations in the bigger cities, you had on the horizon, you had new music coming from Franz Ferdinand and Coldplay and 9 Inch Nails and Depeche Mode and like a lot of big names and dozens of quality smaller names that were coming up.
Quite honestly, it was the internet that grew this band. That was really a huge key.
Right now, it definitely is the best bet. I mean, the cell phone is it. It's going to be your portable internet. As soon as Wi-Fi becomes the norm, you're going to just have you're going to hold your TiVo, whatever the heck it is. It's going to be right there, and that's how you're going to buy and sell everything you want, musically or otherwise.
When Wi-Fi is ubiquitous, we're going to have a media landscape that's going to be shattered. Right now, we're just in a transformative stage. within a few years it's going to be blown apart, and there's not going to be 30 radio stations when you get in your car. There's going to be 30,000 or 300,000.
I think everyone agrees radio still is the bulk of how people hear about it, but it's not growing, I don't think. I think there's other avenues that are growing and radio is decreasing.
If you had told me that we would probably have 1 million streams launched in a year and have you know, probably 750,000 listening hours to an online radio station playing alternative music in Philadelphia, I would have never believed it. Y100 going away is going to ultimately help the community because it's making people reach out to each other, form a different kind of bond, take it back to where it was when I was a kid in the 80s and you didn't have a radio station, and now we have the internet, and that's helping to really like facilitate that kind of community building. Now if you go to a record company and you talk about a new band or you want to get a band signed, it's not, well, is the local radio station playing them, but how many friends do they have on MySpace? I think it's the last year or two, the music's been better than it has been in a long time.
I think alternative is really the most alive that it's been, and maybe since its creation.
Join us as we investigate the worldwide institution of rock music and try and identify what it has become today. Once again, we're entering a new era. This is Future Alternatives. So what do you guys think? You think I covered everything good?
You covered more than good. The spectrum of the conversation was incredibly entertaining. I even forgot to look at the viewfinder. I was looking at you guys.
Yeah, I was watching in the reflection so I could see
this isn't the paid position.
It doesn't matter.